Welcome to Enjoy the Journey podcast, where we interview expert entrepreneurs and thought leaders to help guide you in pursuit of financial freedom. Presented to you by Jackson Milan, the Wealth Mentor, where we help service-based business owners remove cash flow bottlenecks, maximize their profits, and turn business profits into personal wealth. G'day guys, this is Jackson Milan, the Wealth Mentor, and I'm here with a very special guest today for the Enjoy the Journey podcast. I've got Stu Darling, who is part of an elite mastermind that I'm a part of, and was talking around the subject of leadership and how do you kind of step into your entrepreneurial power as a leader. Many people who get in business, they start doing good work, they're quality technicians, have a natural progression of getting into a leadership position. Many people don't see themselves as a leader, believe that leaders are born, not made, and all of these different stories that we tell ourselves that sometimes holds us back as business owners. So I really wanted to take this opportunity to chat with Stu, share some of his wheel of genius, and really help support you guys to become the best possible leaders so you can lead your businesses and your lives to the success that you want. So Stu, thanks for joining us, mate. How's things with you?
Absolutely brilliant. Thanks a lot for having me. Really looking forward to the conversation. It's something, leadership and resilience is something that I'm very passionate about. And, look forward to sharing some stories and hopefully a few glimmers of truth and that someone can take away.
Fantastic, mate. I'm really looking forward to it. So let's start with Stu. Who are you and what is your business? What do you do?
So who am I? I'm just a wee boy dragged up in Scotland. I saw the death of the great shipyards on the Clyde and realized there was a whole world out there that needed exploring. And I've spent my career, fortunately, exploring the world and exploring me and exploring the people that make up the world. And that's really resulted in a deep understanding of what makes me tick. I spent 25 years in the British Army. So I've done leadership from a very young age, all the way through the military, through the battlefields of the Middle East, into business. And my business is now taking all of that experience and teaching individuals and businesses about what leadership is and what resilience is as well, because the two are very aligned.
I couldn't agree with you more, Stu. So I'd really like to start with your military experience. I know my father was a military man and he was in the force in Chile during the Pinochet uprising, but he was always very tight-lipped about his experience. He came to Australia as a political refugee and never really told me much. And I know that many military individuals don't like to talk about their experiences because it's very shocking. But Stu, I'd really love to talk about how you got into the military in the first place. What was the thing that inspired you to join initially?
I remember my picture. I had two envelopes, one in each hand. One was offering me a degree course in forensic science at Glasgow University. And the other one was offering me a commission in the Royal Air Force. One of them paid, one of them didn't. Simple. Yeah, it was the opportunity to get out of that small village. I had a great childhood, but get out of that small village and begin to explore the world. And my father had been in the Royal Air Force Reserves in the UK. My grandfather had been a navigator in the Royal Air Force during the Second World War. So light blue was it seemed at the time like the right color of uniform. All of that changed after about 6 years when we both recognized that we didn't really get on, and I transferred across the British Army.
Fantastic, mate. Now, did you see yourself as a leader prior to joining the military, Stu?
Yeah, I did. I was one of those pain in the ass Cub Scouts who realized that if my six was doing the best out of all of the different sixes, then we'd get more points, and points made prizes. And I then moved on to Scouts. Actually, the first time I visited Australia was to go to the World Scout Jamboree in Australia in whatever year that was, 84. I was a leader to be allowed to be an ambassador for Scottish Scouting. I wouldn't have called it leadership back then, but there was I just had a natural bent to being able to lead people. Maybe not lead them well, but I was able to lead them. That's where the dream of leadership came from.
Beautiful. I love that. Now, in the military, there's a lot of big egos. There are typically dominant personalities, people that are really kind of striving for that top spot and wanting to be the top dog, wanting to be the one that calls the shots and getting all of the glory. Did you find yourself struggling with finding that leadership position and getting the respect of your troops when you were in the military?
It's a really interesting point because many people who've not served consider that leadership in the military is very, very shouty. This is it, autocratic. When the bullets are flying and stuff needs to happen, there's got to be, this is how we're doing it. I found that over time, and I believe there are only three types of leadership. There's autocratic, democratic, and laissez-faire. It really simplifies when you're trying to teach leadership. And it's the quieter individuals that always get the best from the teams. I mean, I was fortunate enough to run covert operations across the globe, some of the most highly qualified soldiers, sailors, and airmen that you'll ever meet. But there was never a time that I needed to be the shouty leader, because we all understood what our job was and we got on and did it. The military is full of big egos, and there is a place for those egos. But more often than not, it's actually about that still small voice of democratic leadership that gets everyone alongside. Doesn't mean that you've not got to make the decisions. As the leader, you still make the final decisions. But if you bring people in, you're going to have a far more close-knit group. And this works just as much in small teams in business. A small, close-knit team that will do what needs to be done because they were part of making the decision to do it. I didn't really ever feel that I properly felt fitted in to the bigger scheme of the military. But that's potentially, or that's possibly why, or the reason for it is because I was operating in those small teams.
Beautiful. So you've operated in some really elite and cutthroat environments of covert operations, being a military commander. There are a lot of synergies between the military and business. There's a lot of time and effort. And I guess if you look at any organization in the world, the most efficient organization at training for outcomes is the military, in my humble opinion. How much of that training of being a leader is done in a theoretical environment, and how much is carved out in the battlefield when bullets are flying?
Yeah, I mean, let's call it rehearsals and practicing and going on exercise. And, all of that is done so well in the military. And, as you progress through military training, you actually progress to live firing exercises. Things are being shot at you, a safe distance above your head, a couple of inches, and you are operating with live weaponry. That's not day one. Day one is you're lucky if you're given a weapon. And you begin to understand what you're doing and you work your way through it all the way up to those live fire exercises. And those live fire exercises become almost the tick in the box that says, right, you guys are now ready to deploy to whatever war zone it is you're heading into. Those rehearsals continue. Even once you're in theatre, the rehearsals continue, the orders process continues. So that when someone does actually shoot at you, someone who doesn't like you shoots at you, you might not be ready for it, but you're in a position to recognize what's happening. So a step-by-step approach, that's what it needs to be in business as well. Too often it's just get on with it. My last job in the military, I the honor of being responsible for over 200 troops. I trained over 10,000 people with a budget of $35 million. I wasn't given that on day one. That took 20 years to be given that. Day one, I was given a fellow junior officer to look after, and we tried not to make mistakes with each other before you then process through. And I think there's a massive lesson in there. I believe that the military training system, the military leadership program works really, really well in business. I mean, even the economists in the US last year started recognizing that corporate America is now bringing military planning into the skyscrapers because they recognize that it's concise, it's sharp, it's transitional. So change comes with the whole process. The military program is, step by step, let's bring more of it into business because it means that we're not shocked quite as much as we may be the way it happens at the moment.
Yeah, I agree. Look, I've come to realize that people who've served in the military and also elite level sports people make phenomenal business owners, because they've been taught that method of thinking and acting that just is conducive to getting results. But for us mere civilians who maybe haven't been in the military or been exposed to that world or played sport at an elite level, how can we take some of these lessons and apply them into our business when it comes to leadership, Stu?
There's two things there. I mean, I'll start off by saying simplify. I'm coming towards the conclusion there's only actually two things that really matter in business. There is time and there's money. Because if you've got one, you can create the other. And if you've got the other, you can create the other. So it just bounces backwards and forwards. And once you recognize that, prioritize. I work with a whole bunch of businesses, and while they get quite frustrated with me because I'm ignoring stuff that they see as really, really important. And look, I completely get that it's important, but a job of a leader is, or one of the roles of the leader, you should only come to the leader when you can't solve the problem. And we've got to train our teams to have the faith in themselves and the trust in the organization they're a part of, to realize that when I say, just get on with it and come to me when you don't know the answer, what I actually mean is just get on with me, just get on with it and come to me when you don't know the answer. Not check in, check in, check in. Go away and get on with it. I trust you. Get on with doing it. When you don't know the answer, come to me and I will then help you understand what the answer might be. But if it's that big an issue, come to me and I'll deal with it. Your leaders get sucked down into the weeds very, very quickly because, human beings, let's face it, we're all just lazy. We want to go to the simplest place. So we get sucked back into, business owners, entrepreneurs are the perfect example of, oh, great, I can get onto the tools again. I can get into the business. No, stay on the business. That's what you've got to do, stay on the business. And educating businesses and business leaders to stay on their business, except when they really, really have to step into it, is the key to it. So simplify and prioritize. And make sure that you're prioritizing. Delegate till it hurts, and then delegate some more. So those are probably the three things that I push really, really hard with any individual or team that I go in and work with.
I think this is really important, Stu, because I think this becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Like, how many business owners have you worked with that said, oh, if I want something done right, it has to be done myself? And they end up proving themselves right.
And just as guilty. Yeah, just as guilty. We were at a charity event this morning, and I was asked to can you just go and help out doing that? No, I'll fucking run it. And in I stepped and went and did my thing. And constantly do that because, of course it's going to be done. It's going to be, no, just back off. Because only by backing off will we see how awesome our teams are. Only by backing off will our teams see how awesome they are.
Yeah.
And then you begin to understand you're future-proofing your business. You're identifying, I talk about something called the trust verification graph, and it's basically the crossover point. When I arrive, I'm not going to trust you at all, but I'm going to verify what you're doing. And as I trust you more and more and more, I verify less and less and less. And that crossover point is the point that you see a future leader. Now, there are some people that you will never, ever give the amount of trust to that you'd like to because they're just not quite there. And that's all right, because we need the doers in our business just as much as we need the leaders. Yeah. But you also need to recognize who's coming through your succession plan.
Makes a lot of sense. Look, I think one of the key parts, I guess, looking back at the military, of what I noticed is that people who have served have a huge level of resilience, because you can't be in an environment where it's life or death if you're not a resilient human being. You can't just quit. And I think that's something that many business owners, entrepreneurs have this characteristic quite a lot. But when it comes to building resilient teams, this can sometimes be an issue. Now, question for you, Stuart, having trained so many military men and women, is resilience a prerequisite for people who join the military, or is it something that typically has to be nurtured and honed to create that resilience?
So I look at anything and believe that human beings can't do anything. We can do anything we choose to do. Now, some of us might be born with a certain skill set or a certain mentality that says you're going to be a great pianist, you're going to be a great mountaineer. And those are just the traits that you're born with because of the tribe that you were born into, because of the environment you were born in. But we can train anyone to do anything as long as we shift that mindset. As far as resilience is concerned, the more and more I understand how our brains actually work, because an awful lot of work I do, the learning I'm doing is the quantum level of how our brains actually operate at certain times, how they develop at certain times in our lives, and what causes us to stop being resilient. We were born resilient. Children are really, really resilient. And then as you trip up, and it generally happens around about the age of 12 to 14. So those junior teenager years, life takes over. We get stressed out. We begin to feel anxious. We begin to have fear. And all of a sudden people say, are you depressed? Take some tablets. No, let's not do that. Let's back up and understand why that's happening. So we were born resilient. We've just got to remind ourselves how to get back to that place. And when we get back to that place, we create capacity in our hearts, in our minds, then allow us to grow more resilient. That's the key to all of this. It's not that I'm not resilient. Okay, I will accept that statement. If you will accept the statement that once upon a time you were resilient, and there'll be examples of where you've been resilient, we just got to find them and work forward from them. I mean, I remember we were in Iraq. I was sending one of corporals up country and to one of the bases north of Basra. And this place was getting mortared and bombed and shot at every night. And I'd been up there frequently and wasn't actually that bothered about the fact that it was getting blown up fairly frequently because no one had died. No one was actually getting injured in there. It was just uncomfortable. And this young corporal, I'd said, right, okay, you're it, because we're on demand up there. You're going to have to go up there to relieve some folks so they can come back. And there was tears and snot. It wasn't pretty because all he'd heard was the bad news stories. We talked it through. We spoke about his training. We spoke about the experiences that he'd had to that date. I mean, he was going anyway. I'd made the decision. I was chucking him on a helicopter off he was going. By the time he landed, he was slightly more resilient. Within a week, when he understood the situation, he was actually helping the more junior ones with what they needed to do to deal with their resilience. So it's in there. We know it's in there. We just need to help our team get it out. And while you can do team resilience training, and it works really, really well, I start whole resilience training for teams based in values. Because if we understand our values, as a team, life becomes so much easier because you know what you've got a baseline for everyone. Then it becomes more and more individual because you've then got to deal with personal fears. And as Monty Python suggested, we're all different.
I love that. That's fantastic. I think what's really interesting there, Stu, is that I think sometimes it can be more valuable to have that position where the lack of resilience or the kind of the chink in the armor is exposed, and then there's a transition period to being resilient. Because if you never had the contrast of that experience, you probably would have taken it for granted. And of course, we can all wish for the best, most resilient teams that are all high performing, but that can be the ultimate goal. But the reality is we're likely having to take our team on a journey, much like we take our clients on a journey from where they are to where they need to go. So what are some management tips that business owners, entrepreneurs can implement that help with that transition from maybe what they perceive as a lack of resilience to being resilient and delivering to their targets?
I think great question. And it's one that I reflected on last week. So a couple of weeks ago, I went whitewater kayaking in South Island down in Murchison. Because I thought, right, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to get into the water and have some fun because I used to whitewater kayak. It wasn't until I was face down in the water thinking, this was never so tough, that I realized it was 25 years ago I'd last been in that sort of level of white water. I got to thinking, I got to the bottom of the river. I'm sure I wasn't meant to be that wet by the time we got to the bottom of it. Sitting in a beautiful place that I could only have got to if I'd been through that turmoil. And, there's some great analogies that I come up with when I'm out there doing stuff. And I realized that, I often talk about, resilience. Sometimes resilience is no more than being able to get out of bed in the morning. What right do I have to say that? Because I'd leap out of bed in the morning, hit the shower, meditate, do physio, whatever I'm doing. So what right do I have to say some people find it tough to get out of bed? So as a leader, I believe that we have got to put ourselves in difficult situations. We have got to go and find that place where we are shit scared, where we are getting it wrong, where we are no longer capable, where we have reached the end of ourselves. Because when we've done that, we have to find our way back. And finding our way back is the lesson in resilience that we can then teach others. There is absolutely no point in me standing in front of a room of people or in a coffee shop with a client talking about how resilient I am when I live so comfortably. Brendan Burchard, in his book, The Charge, talks about being caged, being comfortable, and the charged life. For the most part, we live comfortably. And that doesn't require much resilience. So we need to put ourselves in harm's way, whatever that might be for you, in order to feel the discomfort, because that breeds humility. And if we teach resilience from the perspective of humility, our team will grow. because we're not then actually telling them what to do. We're working with them alongside them. We're asking the right questions about where their fears are, why they have anxiety, all of those important feeling questions that as leaders we often can forget about because we're in execution mode all of the time. Not execution like that, I mean doing the job better. We've got to work through it. So bringing humility and vulnerability to the team when we're talking about resilience is key to actually growing the team with you rather than managing the team.
Makes a lot of sense. Perfect. Look, I think there's a big factor, and it's sometimes a little bit of a taboo to talk about, Stu, but I know from my own first-hand experience, I gave up drinking 5 years ago. I recognize that I come from a long history of alcoholics. I was kidding myself for many years that I didn't have a problem until I just finally recognized that I was an obnoxious human being and I just didn't like who I was when I drank. So I decided to take a year off, and then after 3 months, I decided to never drink again, and it's been 5 years. It took me that 3 months to realize how poorly I was performing as a human being in all aspects of my life and the toll that alcohol was having on me. And I'm a big believer in getting entrepreneurs to be sober, give up drugs and alcohol, live a clean lifestyle, and actually rise to their fullest potential. And I've noticed that particularly people who've served in the military and entrepreneurs alike, many of them self-medicate as a way of dealing with their stress or their what they perceive as their lack of resilience, or a way of kind of taking the edge off. I'm sure you've seen in both of your lives of a military man, but also in business, dealing with leaders, that drugs and alcohol have to be a problem, right?
I think if you look at Jordan Belfort, the Wolf of Wall Street, yes, he had massive success, but it was fueled on drugs and alcohol. And he hit rock bottom, and he's now working his way back up again. But he recognised that. Look, I mean, the military, the British Army, is an amazing drinking culture. Day one of military training, there's the meet and greet, and you start drinking. I raced alpine skiing for the British Army for a couple of seasons. For the fun day, the prize was cases of beer. This is a sporting competition, and beer is the prize. So my relationship with alcohol, I started drinking, really, when I joined the military. I joined up when I was 18. So yes, I had a few drinks before then, but started drinking when I was 18. And that was the beginning of what I describe as my 28-year drinking binge. It was the biggest session ever. That followed me out of the military. And I knew it was a problem. I'd tell myself it wasn't, and I could give up drinking for a month. Then I'd start again. And that's great, because I knew I could stop, but I didn't. And it went on until the 3rd of July, 3 years ago, done. And I decided it was going to be, I set myself the 333 challenge, because everyone gives up alcohol for a year. And I thought, right, 333 days, the 333 challenge. And I did. I stopped drinking for 333 days. I stopped drinking for longer than that because I was frightened to start again, because what would happen? I've never done drugs. Back when you joined the military, if you'd ever stood in a phone box a million miles away from someone smoking a spliff, they'd find out, so you weren't allowed to. And I just never have. Part of the reason that I haven't even now when I could is that having an addictive personality, I don't want to run that risk. One of the challenges I did set myself with alcohol was that, is it possible to stop drinking but then find a healthy relationship with alcohol? The story I was telling myself was I didn't want alcohol to run my life, either by always drinking it or by never drinking it. Is there a space? I'm now at the stage that I enjoy a drink of wine. I recognize when I've had one, and I recognize that I need to make sure, I almost need to plan my next 5 days after I'm deciding to have a drink so that I'm firing on all cylinders. But I do enjoy a drink. My wife and I enjoy sitting having a glass of wine. But it's not, I mean, God, when I was thinking about giving up, a couple of beers, a full bottle of wine, and a few whiskeys every night. If there's anyone listening who's recognizing this, I was still running marathons. I was running covert operations, driving fast cars, carrying weapons. And I was still able to operate, going, hey, look, I'm Superman. I can do this. No, you can't. And you've actually got to not to do it for long enough to realize how powerful it's not to do that. Enough respect to anyone who has looked in the mirror and realized that, no, this doesn't work. And one of the great things was when I did the 333 challenge publicly, and the number of my ex-soldiers who came up and went, boss, I didn't know. and I do this and I have that problem, I'm going to join you. And the number of people that stop drinking as a result of me saying, guys, I've got this problem, I'm going to deal with it. It's so powerful. And I completely agree. The power that we have when our bodies and our minds are clear of whatever it is you're medicating with. Yeah, I mean, that can even be down to toxic relationships. Let's face it, it covers more than just drugs and alcohol. When you're clear of that, you've got another level that you haven't even thought of.
I agree, mate. And I think this is a really important trait because I know that I've definitely grown as a leader from being self-aware enough to recognize my own flaws and not being blindly driven by ego. Because I think that there's a fine line, right, of being a good leader who is ego-driven, which sometimes you can be very self-centered and closed off to the world, and
Yep.
being somebody who is self-aware enough to recognize your failures and your shortcomings and then be able to constantly be growing as a result.
We used to, when we were doing unarmed combat training and weaponry training, one of my instructors who was an SAS warrant officer, he said to me, never let the red mist fall. What he meant was, don't ever get angry. Doesn't matter what sort of fight you're in, whether it's a gunfight or whether it's hand-to-hand or knife fight, whatever it is, never let the red mist fall. It's stuck with me to this day because when the red mist falls, all that is your ego saying, I don't like what's happening to me. Whatever that is, it might be someone disagreeing with you, it might be some bad news, it might be someone punching you in the face, whatever it is. But never let the red mist fall. Over time, what I have recognized is that doesn't mean you shouldn't become angry. There are times that it's right to be angry, but that anger must be a choice. It must be a response, not a reaction. The ego is important, but it's important to recognize when it can get you into trouble.
I couldn't agree more, mate. So, Stu, we've covered so many great subjects and some great stories here. So if you had to summarize your top 3 tips for entrepreneurs to step into their entrepreneurial power and to be the best possible leaders to take their business, their teams, their clients, where they ultimately want to go, what would your advice be?
Think big and then think even bigger. If you're an entrepreneur, it means that you got some great ideas, but think big, because if you're not thinking big, then you're going to get bored. And something that I've recognized is that, I can invent that. No, bring it back. So think big. Remember that it's going to take time. And that's the resilience piece. Anyone who thinks that, and I've been in a business with someone else who thought we're going to be the next unicorn, we're going to be billionaires by next Tuesday. This thing's going to take time. So you need to have the faith in yourself. You need to have the resilience to see it through. Don't be frightened to be yourself. We are all unique. Don't try and fit in. Get out there and be you. You were put here to be you. So have the bravery to do it. Having just said that, 3 of my values are bravery, tenacity, and enthusiasm. That's what you need to go out there. Go out there with those and take on the world on your terms. The world needs entrepreneurs. Don't be frightened. The world needs leaders. Don't be frightened of the fact that the word leader and the phrase and the word leadership have got a little bit of a bad name over the last few years. The world is crying out for leaders. Don't be frightened to be one.
Amazing, mate. You've shared so much value, Stu. So I'd love to hear who's an ideal client for you, and if somebody is interested in getting in touch with you, how are they best to do it?
First up, the easiest way to find me on Facebook, just look for Stu Darling or Stu Darling Lead Through Life are the 2 pages that I've got. Jump onto the website, www.studarling.com, or Google The Resilience Show. I do a radio show in New Zealand, and you get the playback on podcast from, so Google The Resilience Show. That's how you can get as much of me or more than me than anyone will ever need. I love working with those leaders who have got to the end of themselves but have recognized it. That point in your business when you go, I've got to grow here and I don't know whether I'm growing, I'm scaling, I'm the genius behind this. How do I shape it next? How do I become resilient? I also love working with people who are interested in the science of being resilient, of being a leader. This isn't just about reading books about leadership or listening to podcasts. This is about the why you found yourself in this position and how can I help you go from where you are to where you are next by understanding what's going on in here and in your heart and in your body in general. That's what really, really excites me, because there is such a need for everyone who listens to your podcast came to listen to it for a reason. They're looking for something. We are the people that are actually going to change this world for the better. We've moved beyond the time of government. It's people who recognize that we can change the world by being better ourselves. So we've got to understand ourselves. That's what I'm looking for.
I love that, mate. It's been super inspiring, Stu. It's been so glad to chat with you today, mate. We'll include all of the links for people to get in touch with you in the show notes. Guys, thanks for watching another episode of Enjoy the Journey podcast. Make sure that you do drop us a follow, drop us a like, leave us a review. And if you are interested, make sure that you do reach out to Stu. He's got so much more value to offer. So make sure that you take action, because a good idea in theory remains exactly that, just a good idea, unless you put it into action. Stu, thanks again, mate. Really appreciate it and look forward to chatting to you again soon.
Thanks a lot for your time. It's been a blast. Look forward to doing it again soon.
Thanks, mate.